I came across that little video clip when I was on Scotia Seeds website, and I just thought it was lovely. It just summed up the whole reasoning behind perhaps us putting on this demonstration, plus also some of the feedback that we get for the subjects we want to cover during the live Zooms include growing wildflowers. So a wee bit of the backstory. Jenny's covered most of it, as has the Bug Life video. Between 1930s and 1980s, according to Kew Gardens, 97% of the wildflower meadows were lost in the UK. Wildflowers feed our pollinating insects, provide shelter and feeding grounds for these insects year round, not just in the summertime when we're outside and we're very much aware of all these insects going about, but all year round these insects still need to exist and get on with their business, working for biodiversity and our ecosystem. Don't forget that these insects pollinate our fruits and vegetables that we're growing in the garden, and they help fight against the crop pests that not only us home gardeners but large-scale growers are bothered by as well. Some wildflowers contain compounds used in modern medicine, and this isn't so well known, and I'm no chemist, I don't know very much about it, but I do know that foxgloves are used in the treatment of heart disease. And lastly, to my mind anyway, wildflowers are the simply beautiful plain Janes of the flower world. A cheery sight on those busy road verges. I love it when you see a clump of wildflowers just minding their own business. And for me, well, I've always lived in the countryside, but you know, many of them bring back happy childhood memories. I'll not tell you what else we were doing, but lots of happy memories. And some, like the field poppy, remind me of many lives lost in combat. So what can we, the humble tabletop gardener, do? I don't have a vast field, you don't have a vast field, and even the idea of giving over too much space of our outside living and growing area might be a wee bit unappealing. But the good news is, as we saw in the video, we don't need big areas to help the wildflower population and the benefits that it delivers. Small metre swaths, or a patio pot, or a stretch under a hedgerow, all can contribute massively. And in built up areas especially, this is even more important, as there's even fewer sources of nectar and pollen for the insects. So let's get to doing some of the activity that I'm talking about. I'm going to move some of this stuff out the way. It was just to make it look pretty well. We were talking earlier. So the seeds that I have picked to sow are from Scotia Seeds. They have got a huge selection, choices from coastal meadow mixes to green roof mixes to pond edge mixes and absolutely everything in between. So please go and have a look at their website later. I'm quite confident that regardless of where you're living in Scotland, you will find a seed mix that will be perfect for your locale. This is a hedgerow meadow mix, pardon me, that I have chosen for sowing and growing, and I'm going to use in my hedgerows round about where I live here. Now you can sow these seeds directly onto a patch of earth that obvious weeds have been removed from, like Dokins that Jenny's very proud of, living in Stirlingshire. Remove as many of the obvious weeds as possible. With a rake, give it a fine rake to loosen off any of the compact layer of soil, maybe about 2 centimetres, give it a good rumble round about. Then quite literally, you're going to sprinkle these seeds. They're quite fine. Over your prepared area. Now, on a windy day, it's blown a hoolie down here. It's absolutely gorgeous. The sun is out. I'm in Ayrshire. The sun is out. It's really nice, but I've got a really strong wind going. So if I was to sow these today, I would be making sure that I was down as close to the ground as I could so that the wind didn't catch the seeds and like blow them away. Hopefully they would germinate where they landed, but I want them to be growing where I want them, underneath the hedgerow. So get them sowed down on top of the prepared soil. Now, with fairly smooth soled shoes, just tramp them in, you know, so that you're getting a nice contact between the seed and the actual soil. And if there's no rain forecast for the next day or two, get a watering can, and with the rose head on it, that's the head that kind of shower head spray effect on it, water them over. You don't want to have a deluge of water going over it, a fine spray, so that you're not actually dislodging the seeds from the soil. But today we are focusing on this as a tabletop activity, which is suitable for young and old alike, connecting us with the outdoor natural world, giving us a little bit light exercise, developing fine motor skills, but along with the anticipation of what has yet to come and the accomplishment of the task. So Jenny says we're going to be looking at seed bombs. We're going to do that later on. Firstly, I want to sow some of my seeds into little sections, which lends itself beautifully as a tabletop activity. So I've got my seeds. I have got my compost. In the wild, in their natural environment, wildflower seeds grow in kind of barren, non-cultivated, kind of like forgotten about land. So you don't want to use a compost that's full of nutrients. This is actually a seedling compost that I have here, and seedling compost is nice and variable, nice and fine, and it's got next to no nutrients in it. So I'm working with my seedling compost today. I've got my little section here. It's a proper plant section, but you don't need to have a proper plant section. You could use something like this food dish, as long as it's got drainage holes at the bottom. That would work. A grape box, a blueberry box, tomato box, things like that. But this plant section has got drainage holes in it. I have already got my labels printed out, my name of the seed and the date on it, because I'm growing quite a lot of things outside at the moment. And at the moment, if I didn't have labels in them, I wouldn't have a clue what was where, because at the moment, everything just looks like compost. I have got a little spoon for filling with, and a cup also, which is good for adaptive measures. But I am just going to crack on and just use my hands, as I always do. And I'm breaking up any of the clumpier bits in the compost. And quite literally, just filling the seed box over. This in itself is a great wee job. I've got a fabulous job, in case anybody's wondering. I get to play with compost and jiggle about, and it's lovely. So I'm shaking it to knock out any excess holes, any excess air holes, I should say, in the compost. And then I'm taking a second dish and I'm just kind of like compacting it down a little bit. Okay, now, this is hard to demonstrate how many seeds are in here, but trust me, this is a heaped teaspoonful, and if I try and put this into the teaspoon, it'll go everywhere, so I'm not going to attempt to do that, sorry. But this is a heaped teaspoonful of wildflower seed, and when you read the instruction, and the instructions that you get if you do buy seeds from Scotia Seeds are extensive. You've got 2 sheets of A4 paper telling you loads about the seeds varieties and the care of them and how to sow them, but it tells you that 3 grams will cover an area that is 1 metre square. And I've weighed this. This is 3 grams in my hand. So this amount of seed here is what I would sow into an area 1 metre square, or if you're old school like me, that's kind of a yard by a yard, 3 feet by 3 feet. So I've got my compost in my pots, and I'm just going to pick up. I'm not going to put all these seeds here because this will not be for that area. I'm just going to sprinkle across. Like so. Now, wildflower seeds are not the cheapest to buy. They're not the most expensive either. But I don't mind paying that little bit extra for them because I know that they've been harvested and farmed locally here in Scotland. Scotia Seeds are in Brecon, for anybody that's maybe up that way. But I'm looking after them very carefully because they're quite valuable. So that's me got my seeds in now. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of compost over the top, but really you don't have to. You think about it in the wild when they set seed and get blown about by the wind, nobody goes out and digs a little hole and puts them in the ground and covers them nicely with soil. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is good. Got my seed variety, name written on one side, date, just for my records, and I am going to give it a good scoosh of water. Okay, I'm not going to do all that just now. I'm just going to show you, and that is basically, that is it. 2 weeks at least before you'll see any germination. They're not the fastest flowers to germinate, and again, it all really depends on the outside environment. If it's nice and warm and the temperatures work with the necessary rainfall, they'll germinate within the 2 weeks, but if not, they'll hang about and they'll germinate when they're ready to germinate, which is fabulous. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to grow wildflowers any earlier. They wouldn't have germinated for me, so there's no point trying to sow them. So these are a different type of plant that I sowed a good wee while ago. But I just wanted to show you that these plants were put into the similar section that I've just sown my wildflowers into. And when my wildflowers are maybe about half the height of these plants, when they're about 5 centimetres, let's say, I'm just going to tease them out, squash the bottom, pull them out, and all things being even, I'm going to have some nice roots developing like this. And with these little plugs of compost with plant growing, I'm going to go into my border and just with a trowel, I'm just going to dig little holes and just quite literally plonk them in from the soil round about them, give them a good water when I plant them that day, and leave them to their own devices thereafter. Now, this particular seed mix that I've chosen, there's a mixture of annual seeds and perennial seeds. Annual seeds are flowers that will flower this year. They will put on their green leaf, they will make their buds, they will make a flower. The flower will die, it will die off and go over, but it will have made seeds, and those seeds will get cast by the wind or the birds and the bees and all the rest of it. So that's good. But there's also perennial seeds in here. Now, the perennial seeds will not flower this year, but they will put on nice, good growth. They'll put on good roots, and those roots will grow further down into the ground. And next year they will flower and make seed, but they will flower again the next year. They will keep on growing. Perennial plants grow for many years. Annual plants only grow for the one growing season. So you could actually put these into containers if you wanted. If you wanted to continue this as a tabletop activity, you could bring some lightweighted patio containers into the table and have people plant on the seeds that have grown and then watch them develop further, and get an insect spotter sheet out, see how many insects you can actually spot. So that is them. Or this is a bigger pot. This is what you would call a 5-litre pot. It's about 22 centimetres in diameter. I hope you can see this okay. I've already filled this up with compost. Just going to put some more in it just to level it off. I'm going to point something out to you. In this pot, if I'm getting the angle right, you will see a little indentation. That is called the watering level. You don't want to put your compost any higher than that, because when I go to water this pot, I know that I can fill from where the compost starts to the top edge of this without it cascading over. and that amount of water that's in there is sufficient water to water all that compost and the plants in there. So always try and underpot, if that makes sense, and use this line as a guide. And then that saves when you're watering the summertime, when you're out with your watering can or your hose. And you know what happens? I've done it myself loads of times. The compost eats up, bubbles over the side with the water, and you lose some compost. You make a mess on that lovely power washed patio that you've just done in the springtime. And more importantly, the water that you were aiming to go into the compost for the roots to get is all just shed over the side and is not being used. So compost only up to that layer, and a pinch of seed. And again, remember, this would do a metre square, so I don't need all these seeds at all. Give a wee bit of a cover, and I'm just going to make contact by just pressing my fingers down round about it, back of my hands. I'm going to put another label in. Now take that outside, sit it on my patio and give it a good water. Now I'm not going to take this outside and sit it on my patio because I'm busy with daffodils and tulips and everything else sitting on outside. But what I will do, I'm going to sit it somewhere where it's sheltered, where it's going to get natural rainfall, and the green growth, the plants will start to grow, and it'll start to do its own business. But come the summertime, when the flowers are here, when I really want to get the benefit of the floweriness, I'll probably slide this slightly boring and ugly looking plastic pot inside one of my fancier, I'll call them my good pots, okay? I'll slide that down inside my fancy posh pot, and I'll have that sitting at my back door because it gets the sun for the best part of the day, and I will enjoy seeing all those flowers, and also enjoy knowing that all these insects are getting the benefit of them. Now, I'm going to leave this in this pot possibly all winter, and next spring I'll see how the notion takes me. I could then plant it completely into the ground, dig a hole this size and plonk the whole root ball, the whole clunk of compost and root that will be in there into the ground. Or I might just keep it in this pot because I don't need to worry about feeding them, because again, wildflowers thrive a wee bit on neglect. Again, remember, in the wild, nobody looks after them. And because there's a lot of compost in this pot, the perennial wildflowers that have been sown in here, there's enough depth here for their roots to grow down and get established. Jenny mentioned in her PowerPoint presentation about sewing now I've forgotten what you said, something lawn, Jenny, tapestry lawn, something like that. Patchwork lawn, something like that. Anyway, and this is what she was referring to. This is a seed tray, and you can maybe see that I've not put a lot of compost in here. I've already sown these seeds. I think I sown these over the weekend, so they've only been in here 4 or 5 days, so there's no sign of germination yet, but I'm not bothered about that. I know it's going to happen, and very little depth of soil, but I know that I'm going to take these and sow them, take the whole layer of compost out, a bit like a Swiss roll, you know, get it out, and it never turns up the right way, but I'm sure it'll come out in several good pieces, and I will slot it in below my hedgerows where I want it to go and give it a good water in, and again leave it to its own devices. So that's the 3 ways that you could start sowing seed into patio pots, containers that you can then pot on further, and start introducing those corridors that the beeline video was telling us about. Little plots of pots dotted all over the place is ideal. These insects don't fly very far anyway, so as long as they can make that hop, skip and a jump from this street to that street, that's perfect. Lots of little areas will go a long way to helping them. Okay, so let's just move that. on to my seed balls now. Now, seed balls are great. Or I think they're great. You can buy seed balls. You quite often see them in garden centres and places like that. But just be wary, because they might not be native to Scotland, the particular seeds that they've used. I'm not saying they won't be, I don't know. Just have a quick check to see where they were made, and get seed bomb throwing is what they call it. I think it's guerrilla gardening as well. These are my seed balls that I made over the weekend, and basically they're like truffles. They look better than my truffles actually. They're little balls of compost and seed mixed together. Young children really like making them because you can get your hands messy, and then they get to launch them into an area, which is good fun as well. Use them as target practice. But let's not forget, like, you know, older folks and less able. Seed balls are really easy to see and very easy to handle. There's no bending required. If they can fling them, they can fling them. If they can't fling them, they can drop them at their feet and use their foot to squidge them down into moist soil, or use the wheelchair wheel, I should say, to roll them into the ground. You don't, what else? Reminiscence work. You could make bespoke seed balls. I've collected a really lovely poppy that was growing in a friend's garden last year. I got the seed heads from her in the autumn, and I've sown those seeds in sections, but next year or this autumn I'm actually going to sow the seeds into seed balls and give seed balls away to all my friends for Christmas presents, because I'm tight. So yeah, you can make seeds to make their own favourite heirloom plants that are important to them. And when we get down to the mixing of it, I need to put water in at some stage, but I was thinking, you know, you can use warm water, and if you're using that warm water to mix the mix together, that's a therapeutic activity in itself for tired hands. So what is the mix? The mix is 5 parts compost. So I've got 5 little cups of compost in here. Again, the same compost, my seedling compost that I was talking about. You can then add 2 cups of clay soil. If you have a particularly clay, cloggish garden soil, you can add that in, or you can add clay powder. Now, clay powder you can source quite easily. I got this off the internet, and it's Fuller's Earth, but you get other varieties as well. Now, clay powder has its other advantages. Not only is it cleaner and tidier than going out and digging a clog of clay out your garden, but it is very good for face masks. If you read the instructions on the packet, it tells you how to make a face mask out of it. And once you've worked with it and you go and rinse your hands off, you'll realise how it works, because my hands were beautifully smooth after having done it. So I've got 5 parts compost, 2 parts clay powder or clay soil, and 1 part seed. So this was the size of cups that I was measuring earlier. So this is my 1 part seed. Just going to put that in. Away. And I've just got a wooden spoon, and I'm just going to mix that together. Or you can use your hands. I'm going to get my hands out here in a wee minute, but some people might not like touching the bits and bobs, so that's fine. It's a bit like baking actually, and I quite enjoy baking. As I say, these actually look better than my homemade truffles. I wouldn't give them away as a Christmas present. Okay, so I'm just adding a good slush of water in here. Give it a bit of a mix round about. And another reason I'm using the spoon is I don't have a sink out here to wash my hands in properly, and the last wee thing I want to do, I need to have relatively clean hands. So you can see it's starting to come together now. you can understand why children like doing this. And perhaps in a care home, some of the ladies and gentlemen for that matter, who were keen bakers in the day, they start to give you into bother by now for actually mixing that the wrong way and not doing the letter dry as we were taught to in home economics many years ago. I'm actually going to use my hand because I can't move. So I'm just kind of like kneading it together. This feels so nice. The sun is shining in here, and this water is actually warm because the sun's been shining on it all day. And it's very nice. This is what we miss about not being able to come out and do live demos in the flesh with people, because you're just having to take my word for this at the moment. Whereas if I was in the same room as you, we'd all be doing this, and I wouldn't have to convince you of anything. You would experience it for yourself. So again, back to my truffle size, and I'm just taking a Dodd walnut size, and I am just rolling it together, and that is my seed ball. I'm going to set it on a tray with something like baking paper, greaseproof paper, and I'll just let it air dry. And within a day, you're going to have, now, yeah, you can hear that, the difference. This one's like much harder. And the theory behind it is you launch them where you would like them to grow in the general area, because my aim's not so good as that. And when the conditions are right, when the temperature's high enough and there's been enough rainfall, the compost will start to break down, the seed will start to germinate, and they've got a nice wee comfy composty bed to start growing in, and eventually they will start setting the roots down into the ground round about them. So that is your seed balls, and you have to excuse my messy hand. Okay, now if you thought that was messy, the next bit might not go down very well. And if that's the case, I've got Jenny instructed to cut away very quickly, like what they do in the telly, and put on some, nice video clip or something like that. Because this is something new that I tried. I'd seen it and I thought, I'm going to have a wee shot of this. Oops. These are coloured seed balls. These are 2 yellow ones that I made this morning because I learned my mistake when I made these ones earlier. These were bright green. These were shocking pink. And that was a lovely yellowy. But anyway, I never put enough food colouring in. These quite literally are little balls made up of a natural mineral modelling clay that has got a little bit of compost in it and a little pinch of seed wrapped together into this ball shape, which was left to air dry for a whole day. And then I dipped it in a mixture of corn flour, milk and food colouring. And this is what I ended up with. So I'm going to have a wee go at showing you, but because my hands are so dirty, I'm not really sure how this is going to work. So we'll have a go anyway. Let's find the right tub. So we've got a link to these things that I'm talking about. If you did want to have a go, you can buy these online. This is a modelling clay. This is my little bowl of compost that I've been working with, and this is still my same seeds that I've been working with all afternoon. So I'm just going to take a Dodd being a large walnut size piece of clay. Actually, this will clean my hands, won't it? Look at that, wonderful. So I'm rolling my clay into a nice ball, because there's some kind of like stretchy bits in it that if you don't give it a good roll round about, it doesn't seem to work for me. And then I'm just using my thumb and making a little hole in the middle. It's a bit like the old-fashioned kind of rough wooden bowls that you would be served your gruel in, like so. Pinch of compost, hardly any. I hope you can see this against my dirty hands. And then a tiny pinch of seed. That's all I'm putting in there. I'm going to put the rest of the seed back in my little tub. Now, I'm going to pinch this together to make it a kind of pasty shape or dim sum shape, if you can get my drift. So I'm joining it together, if you can see that. And then I am just very gently going to roll it back into its little ball shape. And it looks really dirty, but you would have clean hands when you're doing this yourself. There we go. And then I'm going to set that on my parchment paper and let it air dry. And in true Blue Peter style, these are ones that I made yesterday that are now, you can maybe hear that chapping, that are much, they're not tacky to touch anymore, they're quite dry. So now to the really good bit. I don't know if any of you do those mad colour runs where you're out doing your 5k or 10k or whatever it is, and then for some strange reason people shoot that coloured powder at you, and you keep on running absolutely knackered if you're like me, and you're now covered in pink and blue and yellow, and it's like, oh, this makes it so much better. You can buy that powder online, and it's called Holly powder, H-O-L-I. Now you can use holly powder instead of food colouring, and apparently the holly powder is much more effective. But I went online and it's very expensive, so you really want to just make friends with the next colour run that's taking place and go and buy a couple of them. So we're sticking with the food colouring. So this is corn flour, just run-of-the-mill out the supermarket corn flour that you would use perhaps in baking or thickening your mince if it was a wee bit runny. And the recipe says 2 teaspoons of corn flour to 1 of milk. But 1 never worked for me, so I'm going to put in 2. Going to give it a stir to check consistency, because you want it to be kind of runny, kind of honey like. No, that's not looking good to me. This is getting better. Ooh. Yeah, sorry. Hope this isn't making you want to go make a cup of tea or anything like that. That sounds better. I don't know if you can hear that, but I can hear the corn flour, like the starchiness of it stretching. Now I actually think that's too runny. Having said all that, that's just a little bit too runny. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to leave it and show you something else. Another of my one that I made earlier. Right, that feels better. Yep. Cooking with gas now. What will we go with? Let's do red. Okay. So food colouring is really quite cheap out the shops. I think these were 49p. And it says add loads. So I obviously didn't put in enough the last time. Of course, the thing is the food colouring makes it a wee bit runnier as well. But that's a lovely colour actually. This is my yellow left over from earlier on, but I didn't want to use it. I wanted to make one to show you. So I'm just going to take one of my clay balls that I made yesterday that are now dry to touch. Just going to pop it in, swirl it round about, give it a good coating all the way around. Now, because you know these things are all natural products that I've used here, it's not going to do any harm when these get flung outside into the garden or into the hedgerow or in the woodland walk when you're out walking around about. And then I'm just going to sit it down. You could use tweezers, that would make the job a lot easier. And they'll take about 24 hours to dry. They'll be dry, tacky dry in 12 hours, but they'll dry properly in 24 hours. And you will be left with something like that, ready to fly. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our demonstration. I hope one of these activities would lend itself to your group, and you will have a little go at sowing some wildflower seeds, and if not for yourself, for the larger good of all. Thank you very much.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Perhaps you'd like to hover over your reactions and show our appreciation to Joan there. That was terrific. Thanks so much. Absolutely brilliant, Joan. Now, I think there's been quite a few questions raised throughout that, so I'll leave it to Jane there to voice the questions. Thanks, Jane.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joan. I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was worth breaking into my day off for. And there was one comment about somebody wanting strawberry bonbons, and Jenny said she quite fancied a meringue. So,
yeah, well, maybe there's a point. That's a good point. Just be aware of who you're working with in case they do get confused and they do look too sweetie like. Just have your eye ready for that one.
Okay. So some of the questions from Margaret. Do wildflowers like poor soil?
Well, sorry, Jane, say that again.
Do wildflowers like poor soil?
Yes, they do. That's where they thrive. If the soil conditions are too good, they don't do at all. So yeah, definitely give it a go.
Okay.
I would say if you're sowing seeds, make sure and water them in. Let them get established, and as they're growing as little plants, keep your eye on them and give them a wee help along with some water if it's not raining.
It didn't work. Sorry. Oh, where'd you get that from?
I think we have somebody unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, let me just see if I can mute you.
Take a note of it. It's from the
Please bear with us.
Complementary therapy room. So we just put it in her room if she wanted. Yeah.
Hello. Hello, can you hear us? Can you turn off your volume?
It'll be more, no, but it might be more of a little in for me.
Yes.
So have a little chat because she seems to be into that. Yes.
That's it. Found it.
Lovely.
There we go.
Sorry, that's it.
There we go.
Bear with me one moment. Okay, so another question was, it was Adrian would be keen to know how to collect wildflower seeds for future planting in other areas, and is this easy to do?
Okay, so, oops.
Oh.
My goodness.
Oh.
Are we all right, Joan? Oh,
I hear you. It's all right, we'll get Joan back. Joan, can you unmute? You can hear us.
Is that me now?
that's you. That's it.
Sorry, I think when you were trying to find that person, you muted my table.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, folks. The joys of Zoom meetings. Okay. Question was, how do you collect your own seed? Okay, so when the flower that you would like to grow now, I'm assuming it's kind of not shrubby flowers. Flowers that grow in shrubs, you can't really collect their seeds from their flowers. Perennial plants, plants that die down in the winter time, that reappear by magic in the spring, those type of plants, a lot of them, you can collect their seeds. Now, I used the example of a poppy earlier. So lots of plants like lupins and poppies and foxgloves, they make little capsules, dry kind of capsules, once the flower has stopped flowering and has gone over. Collect those dried capsules, put them inside, and I'm looking to see if I've got any here that I can show you and keep talking at the same time. Sorry, I've got absolutely nothing else here. A paper bag, put your dried seed heads, they're called, in there, scrunch the bag up, put them in your sock drawer, okay? Put them in the sock drawer, write on the calendar, February, go into sock drawer, find paper bag. Inside that paper bag, those little capsules will have exploded open, but the seed will be trapped inside the paper bag. That is the seed that you want to use, okay? And just do the exact same as what I've done here. But whereas wildflowers can get sown outside just now because they're local to Scotland, so they can cope with all the hard weather that might still come. But things like poppies and that, I would be a wee bit more gentle, careful with them, and don't put them out until May. Sow them in May or throw your seed bombs.
Okay. Denise has asked, the area that she's looking at has knee-high hill grass, and how do you deal with that? And Amanda came back and said, you can't sow seeds into thick grass, but you can add plugs or plants moved from elsewhere into the grass.
Okay, what you could do is you could mow the grass really, really low, cut out chunks of the grass. I don't know the area well enough, that might be a ridiculous suggestion here, and I forget the girl's name, sorry.
Denise.
Denise is like giving it no chance. But possibly you could like mow the grass really low, cut out little pockets, and then plant in the seeds. Or what I would suggest you do, since you've got that grass already competing with the area, is the plugs that I sowed to begin with in the little 6 sections. You've got them established so that when they go into that area with the short mowed grass, we've got a better chance of growing. But grass is known to overtake the wildflowers, so it might not work, but definitely worth a go.
Okay. And Amanda again says they're going to be sowing Scotia urban pollinator meadow mix in quite a large area in the village where she lives. And do you have any tips on spreading the seeds evenly? Will they need watering again until they germinate if the weather stays dry?
Okay, get yourself a couple of canes. You can buy canes out the garden centres and or big long bits of wood. If you've got a joiner in the village, he's probably got lengths of strips of batten and things like that you could make into metre lengths. And you're going to go out and you're just going to mark off a metre square, and basically you check your own measurements in case your teaspoon is different to my teaspoon, but measure on the scales and make sure you're setting grams. I'm saying 3 grams because that was my instructions with my particular mix, but your own mix will tell you your equivalent. So let's say it is the 3 grams, and that weighs out to be a teaspoonful. You're going to just scatter your teaspoonful, maybe not from the teaspoon, but into a little dish, and you're going to sprinkle it within that marked off metre square. Now, if it's a huge area, that's going to take forever, but you're just going to ask all your friends and family. You're going to make them all 2 metre squares apart, so it's all socially distanced, and then you're going to move that metre into that 2 metre bit there. Yeah. Watching them in, if it doesn't rain, yes. But if you're talking a huge area, you cannot go out with a watering can. Well, you can, but that would be really difficult. So I would be watching the weather forecast specific to your area and try and sow the seed the night before or the morning, knowing that it's going to rain, a decent amount of rain is going to fall within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Okay. And Denise wondered if you could get children to poke seed bombs in.
Could Denise ask, sorry?
If you could get the children to poke the seed bombs in. But this just come up before you actually did the seed bomb demo, I think.
All right, okay. Yeah, so maybe the seed bomb demonstration.
Answered that, yeah. And is it okay to grow a group of plants in your plug and insert into your border, not necessarily to separate each plant in a plug and not overcrowded?
The thing is, they'll grow. I did that in my border last year with my wildflowers, and they seemed to get on fine. They weren't overcrowded. Again, it's a mix of annuals and perennials. So the annuals will flower this year. They're going to take a lot of the energy out of that area of soil. And they're going to put on their flower. And then they're going to die. They will make seeds, but the seeds are going to get scattered round about. The perennials that were grown in that same area, I've already spotted them. They're starting to come through. The perennial wildflowers, I should say. So they're going to grow there forever. But the annuals, the chances of them growing exactly in the same area for the following years are not of such a worry. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So do seed bombs not mean that all the seeds will end up in the one place together, too close together?
Well, this is where nature comes into their own wee bit. That little ball of compost is going to like break down, and there's going to be rain comes, and the chance of it being sat on a perfectly level piece of soil is slim. There'll be indentations in the soil and the area, so the compost will eke out a wee bit, taking a little seed with it. So a seed will land here. So, I mean, yes, it might, but I wouldn't worry about that.
And Mary asked, why do you use milk and not water? And Jenny said she thought it was because the chemistry of the milk helps to bind and also with the colour.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it as well, Jenny. I thought, gosh, that must be a chemical reaction that's taking place in there. So, yeah. Thanks,
Okay,
Jenny.
So now I'm having to read from the chat now, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit. Are we safe to plant the seeds outside now?
Yeah. Again, they might not germinate. This forecast, well, down here, we've been told don't put your tender plants out, although it's lovely and warm during the day. There's still a chance of like really heavy frost coming. Wildflower seeds live outside all winter naturally. What will happen is you'll put them out, they'll just sit there and not do anything, but just remember where you put them so that when they do start to come up, they might look weed-like, and you don't pull them out thinking that they are the unwanted weeds as opposed to the good weeds. So no, you can sow them just now and put them outside. Mine and my trays are sown and outside.
Okay, and I think that's about the questions for today, Joan. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.